In this video, we will be discussing vertical angles and how to use them in two-column proofs. In example 1, we are given that angle 2 is congruent to angle 3. So let's start by marking that on our diagram with tick marks, and then copying it as our first statement in our two-column proof. So we should start by saying that angle 2 is congruent to angle 3 because that is our only given. Now, we want to prove that angle 3 is congruent to angle 1. So we need to think of how can we get there. There is an in-between step. Looking at the diagram, we know that angles 1 and 2 are vertical angles. So we can conclude that angle 1 is congruent to angle 2 by our new theorem, which is vertical angles are congruent. Now, we know that angle 2 is congruent to angle 3 and angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. So therefore, we can go to our proof statement, which says that angle 1 is congruent to angle 3 because we have two angles that are congruent to the same angle. Another way of writing this is the transitive property. So angle 1 is congruent to angle 3 by the transitive property since angles 1 and 3 are both congruent to angle 2. Now let's take a look at another example. We are given angle O is complementary to angle 2 and angle J is complementary to angle 1. So let's copy down those two givens as our first two statements in the two-column proof. Well, we know that angles 1 and 2 are vertical angles. So step 3 should say angle 1 is congruent to angle 2 because we know that vertical angles are congruent. And since angles 1 and 2 are complementary to O and J and they are congruent to each other, then we can go straight to our conclusion from here and say that angle O is congruent to angle J. This is by a theorem that we learned earlier in chapter 2 that involves complementary angles. So our reason would be if angles are complementary to congruent angles, then they are congruent. That's back from section 2.2. So hopefully now you have a better understanding of how to use vertical angles in two-column proofs. Definitely make sure you study those diagrams carefully to recognize the vertical angles.